Okay, people, freaking out about negative reviews never helps anybody, nor does starting a petition to shut down an aggregator website just because the early reviews of a movie you're excited for happen to be negative. I mean, I'm sorry, DC fans, scream and shout all you want, it's not going to change the fact that this film is just not that good. The tone of Suicide Squad is all over the place from the get-go, as the film is not entirely sure what kind of film it's trying to be. A lot of the humor that's present in the film feels forced and kind of pointless. There are some good jokes here and there, but that's pretty much limited to what we've already seen in the advertising. However, the film bounces from the quirky, offbeat comedy we've seen in the trailers to some straight-up horrifying moments as we see the origins and explanations of these characters. Speaking of which, another problem is that the film is front-loaded with so much exposition that it actually takes a while for the story to actually start. We bounce from perspective to perspective as the film desperately tries to explain who these characters are, like the cinematic equivalent of a Wikipedia page. As a result, you're not really sure who the main character is and why we should actually care about what's going on. On top of that, there are numerous moments and story beats that have no build-up or explanation, like how the characters end up all buddy-buddy despite 1, having only met each other that day, and 2, actively conspiring to break free from their imprisonment and run for the hills, with some of the characters ready to kill each other in just a few scenes prior. This leaves the film feeling like an incomplete story, like there's a lot of information missing. It was like watching an adaptation of a poorly written comic miniseries that tries to smash all of the events of that miniseries into one movie, leaving everything feeling cramped. If this film were to come out at a time in the DC cinematic universe where the characters had already been established individually in separate films, then the style of this film would have worked. As is, it's pretty much the embodiment of all the problems people had with the New 52 and how it was hurriedly trying to establish a new status quo. Speaking of hurriedly trying to establish a new status quo, this film makes the same mistake of trying to rush us into Justice League with all of the Easter eggs and allusions to past and future events instead of focusing on the story they are trying to tell. I get that Batman and Flash caught a bunch of these people, but adding in all of those scenes where we actually see them captured just slows things down and adds very little to the story. Honestly, the best approach they should have gone with is to pick out a character to be the audience proxy and have them learn about the history of these characters in a more organic way. I mean, for the sake of argument, say the film chose to focus on Colonel Flag, who gets assigned to a mysterious need-to-know mission that requires him to work with convicted criminals. That would have been a better way to structure the story, but instead we're stuck with Amanda Waller, who is basically being made to be the DC equivalent of Samuel L. Jackson, except without the likability and charisma. Now, I've got nothing against Viola Davis, it's just that the character is not written very well here. Speaking of characters not written very well, Jared Leto's Joker. I mean, we barely see the guy over the course of the film. He literally only shows up for a cumulative total of about 10 or 15 minutes. The guy is trying way too hard to be like Heath Ledger, except for the fact that he's trying to crank up the sadistic, chaotic side of the character up to 11. As a result, we only really see a violent psychopath, but not the Joker. We don't see the deranged, manipulative mastermind, we just see the violent version one normally sees when his plans fall apart. We don't see the nature of the Joker and Harley's toxic relationship, we're just told that they were in a relationship and that's pretty much it. Honestly, they should have just kept him out of the story and just have him be teased at the end of the film. When it comes to how the film is put together, while it has a great deal more color than the previous DC films, the touch of Snyder is still apparent insofar that most of the settings tend to have bleak color schemes and the abundant overuse of slow motion at times where it isn't warranted. This is especially apparent in the action scenes towards the end of the film, where it actually gets really hard to follow because of the monochromatic scheme of the location, coupled with, I kid you not, a room full of smoke. Overall, this film reeks of meddling by executives that were left in a panic after the reception of Batman v Superman. It tries to be like Guardians of the Galaxy meets Ocean's 11, while at the same time trying to have the grim, dark grit of the previous Snyder-helmed films. While the casting was okay and the performances were just tolerable, the writing and the forced jokes just make for a pretty bland and boring movie. There are semblances of a good idea here, but there's just too many pieces missing to make it work, as this film, along with Batman v Superman, is just trying to rush us into Justice League and not laying any real groundwork aside from more or less saying that these characters exist. If you want to see it for yourself, see it in a 2D matinee, because there's nothing here that is even remotely worth seeing this at full price. All of that said, Suicide Squad gets a 2.5 out of 5. So that's it for this episode of Romney's Reviews. Thank you for watching. Unless I'm taken down by a bunch of angry DC fans, I will see you all next time.